You've had Wendy's Nuggs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new Saucy Nuggs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like honey barbecue, garlic parmesan, or buffalo. Of course, the spicy variations of all three. Or if you're a real heat seeker, try the spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Grab some extra napkins, pick a flavor, and prepare to nug like you have never nugged before, like for a whole new way to nug. It's got to be Wendy's. And it has got to be the wee hours of the morning. Ari Wasserman and I still wrapping up the national title game. The media party is still raging. They closed the bar not long ago, but nobody's going home.
Yeah, it's the adrenaline's pumping in the media room.
I could just feel the adrenaline pumping off you.
Yeah, well, we just got done writing, and hopefully by the time we're done recording the show, those stories will be up. And
mine's
you
already
guys
up.
will be up. Oh, yours already up.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you're fast. I took a little bit longer, but it was kind of cool to just kind of like relive and the moment and try to kind of figure out, like, in perspective, like what this all meant, because it was a pretty important time for not just Ohio State, but the sport in general, in terms of, the new hierarchy of the sport. We're going to have all offseason to get into this sort of thing, but it's a pretty, no matter who was going to win the national championship, we were going to learn something this year, and we learned something.
And you got Ryan Day raising the trophy. We just showed the video of that. I just still, and I know I've said this a bunch of times, but I think back to when you and I were in College Station because we were going to the Texas A&M game because we didn't think there was any chance that Ohio State would lose at home to Michigan. And they did. And I know that people get mad when we mention this game in relation to this, but it is amazing to me that they went from that to ripping through the hardest path any college football team has ever had to take through the postseason. Ever.
Yeah. And the thing that I find interesting, and, Ryan Day alluded to this earlier in the week to a question that I asked about stories that will be told, as the days unfold here and more media sessions are done and stuff, of like what had to have occurred within that locker room in order to get them to this point. But, some of the things that I uncovered during some reporting after the game and being with his brothers in the concourse of the stadium after the game was over is that, after the Michigan game, he wanted his brother Chris Day to, come to Columbus. So he drove 12 hours to be there to console
from New Hampshire
to console his brother. His wife Nina said when he woke up the following morning after the Michigan game that he had a look in his eye that he had to win himself out of this. And I find it funny now, all the speculation of, is he fit for the job, or will he just quit and go be an anonymous offensive coordinator in the NFL somewhere to get away from the winged helmets?
I don't think
it's
so.
Like, while all this was going on, you actually had a very deeply competitive man who seemed determined to right the wrongs that, ailed him.
Yeah.
And like the thing that I kind of discovered, and I didn't know that I was going to write about tonight until I started writing it, is he is the first coach in Ohio State history to win a national championship who didn't grow up in Ohio. And I think for a long period of time, there was this notion, I think because of what happened with John Cooper in the Michigan game and what has occurred in this era in the Michigan game, that Ohio State is not a functional program unless their coach is from Ohio. And not only did, Ryan Day, etch his name in the history books of an Ohio State legend. He's a made man in Ohio, but he has like also proven too that, in this new era of college football that's ever changing, that he's the perfect leader. Because he could have folded, he could have quit, he could have left. They could have got their ass kicked by Tennessee to wrap up the season. They could have been defined by that. And you know me and how I care about rivalries. Like, I'm never going to be like that's a good thing, and they have to get that figured out in the future. Yeah. But I think that the good part isn't that they lost, but the good part is that you kind of find out who your coach is in these moments. And they found out in a pretty good way here.
Well, and Ross Bjork, the athletic director, said the same thing after the game. He said it was pretty key for them to get the message out after the Michigan game that this is their guy. They're going to stand behind him. And I wrote a column earlier this year, and you and I talked about this a lot, not just this offseason, but prior years. Like, and we sort of joked about it. Is Ryan Day enough of a psychopath to really win at Ohio State? Because it's a joke, but it's not. Like, he's a kind of about as normal a human being as you're going to meet for a coach at this level. None of them are normal. But, like, I can see how Urban Meyer would not be fazed by some of the outside stuff or wouldn't care. But Ryan Day strikes me as someone who would like to go to the grocery store every once in a while.
Yeah. Well,
And
you know what?
so to get through this and now be the guy, and look, this doesn't change the fact that Ohio State fans, just like fan base of any good team, they're demanding, they want to win. I'm sure down the road there will be times when they're like, Ryan, you should throw the ball more, you should run the ball more. But I think you put it really well. Like, he's going to go to Ohio Stadium in 2050, and they are going to cheer for him.
Yeah. And you know what I'm kind of starting to come to figure out, too, is that, like, I do think that, yes, he's a normal guy, but I think that he is a psychopath in his own right.
Right.
And that's the thing,
he's
too.
a real
it's like,
competitor. Like,
yeah.
And look, you don't get to this point without being a serious competitor. But there are people who don't want the smoke of a program like that. They do not want to deal with the pressure of a program like that. And, C.J. Stroud said it a couple of years ago, that the pressure is a privilege. And you heard Kirby Smart say that through the years in Georgia's runs. Like, you have to think of it that way. And Ryan Day, in his answer to your question tonight, said, look, you accept this as part of the job.
Mm-hmm.
You take it with the job. And so he's not complaining about it.
Yeah. I mean, and there were moments 6 weeks ago where it looked like he was breaking or broken in the way that he was, rosy cheeks, disheveled in the post-game news conference after the Michigan game. It was just like, this guy, if he could lose this game, could lose any game. And I think that while he will be still held accountable for, his shortcomings in the rivalry game, that he earned himself equity.
Yes.
And we wrote about this and talked about this earlier in the week. But you can move on into the future with a national championship knowing that your program has reached the apex under him. And there are going to be hard times in the future. No program, ask Kirby Smart, is just going to be bulletproof forever. And it's easy to take for granted, but national championships are really hard to win. And it's been 10 years since Ohio State did it. This is the 5th year he's been there. I think there's a lot to take away from this. But the fact of the matter is that I also believe, and maybe we'll talk about this later, but like, winning this game can be very freeing in the other parts of this. Like, I think that you go into the rivalry next year without as much pressure,
right?
Without as much, not that, there's always pressure to win the game, and his reputation in that game is important, but, you go into it maybe a little bit freer from it. Like, the way, here's what my lead of my story. When Ryan Day was hired as Ohio State's coach, I went to New Hampshire and Manchester and hung out with his brothers and people close to him growing up. And they took me to a park that was near a restaurant and where they grew up, where they used to play. And when Jeremiah Smith caught that pass at the end of the game to basically seal the victory, and they saw Ryan Day running up the sideline, jumping in like a kid,
yeah.
It took me back there.
Yeah.
And I feel like knowing who you have as your coach is such an essential piece to the college football experience. And like, Ohio State can traverse the future, the NIL, the rev share, the talent accumulation, the rivalry game, all the things, knowing that they have their guy now. And I think that when you know you have your guy, that's a very important in liberating feeling to traverse this. And I think it's not just a championship, it's a solidification of your future. And I think that's an important thing that they attained today.
Well, the other thing they did was went through a gauntlet that nobody's had to go through before, and nobody else actually had to do it this year but them. They got the toughest path. We said it when the bracket came out. We're like, Ohio State has the toughest path, but we don't think they can get through it. Very quickly, they proved us wrong. After the Tennessee game, you started thinking, okay, well, maybe they can get through it.
And you also have to acknowledge the fact, too, that this is the first year that this could have happened.
Yeah.
Like, Ohio State probably wouldn't have made the playoff in last year's. No, they wouldn't have in last year's system.
That loss to Michigan put Penn State in the Big Ten title game. Now, while Ohio State beat Penn State, the schedules are so unbalanced that I don't know that it would have
finished as a one-loss team. And
Penn State might have been the 4 seed. So we don't know. I was there with Ross Bjork after the game, the athletic director, and he talked about what happened after that Michigan game and what they did on this run. Let's hear from Ross Bjork.
People were ticked off, right? But they knew that if we put the pieces together, this team is so talented, and this has to be the best stretch run ever for anything, let alone 12-team playoff. But we beat how many top 5 teams this year? 5, right? No one else has ever done that in the history of any college football team. So those are the things that'll go down.
Just get them off his back.
She kind of asked the same question.
We all have to ask it, right? Like,
the mantra's been leave no doubt. That's what we do.
real
Left
quick,
no doubt.
Real quick, since
All right, I got to get to the locker room.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Ohio State left no doubt. This is a team that you're not going to question the championship. You're not going to say, well, they lost to Michigan. They're not. Look at who they beat. They beat a Tennessee team that had a great defense that had some flaws, but there was a reason they were the 9 seed. They beat the Oregon team that had the best resume of everybody, that was undefeated, that had beaten Ohio State earlier in the season. They beat a Texas team that played for the SEC title, that was as talented as anybody in the country, as any of these other teams they could have played. It was a gauntlet that, somebody had to win this thing, but usually somebody gets a little break on the way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go into a diatribe about what the 12-team playoff does and how the real Cinderellas in the sport are actually just the juggernauts. You get a third chance because that's kind of just how it played out here. But, I think the reason why Ohio State won the national championship is also the reason why people were so angry they were in the position to begin with. Because people were wondering, well, this is the team that we expected to see all year.
Yeah.
What took so long?
Right.
Like they didn't really show up until the playoff.
Yeah.
And no, luckily for them, we're in a system now where you can actually do that.
Yeah.
But in the past, how many teams in Ohio State history for the past at least 12 years didn't have the ability to figure out their way?
Let's think about the last time. Let's think about the last time the format changed. The 2014 Ohio State team wins the national title in the first year of the 14 playoff, and they were probably a year early. Like, that's not the year we expected them to go all the way. 2015 was the year we thought they'd go all the way, and then they lose to Michigan State that year. It's the only loss they have, but it blocks them from playing for the Big Ten championship. You're not going to put them in over Michigan State. There were other teams that were undefeated, and so they were going to get in, and that team never got to play. I always thought if that team had gotten to play in a tournament like this, that Ohio State probably would have more national titles, because I think that team would maybe Alabama or Clemson would have won it, but that team, the way it evolved, because remember Zeke Elliott, after your question set him off, pops off, it becomes this big existential crisis. They change the way they do their play calling. They change the mechanics of it. And the team that played against Michigan and then played against Notre Dame in the bowl game was a completely different team.
Yeah.
That team would have killed people in the playoffs. Killed them.
Yeah. Well, it was like that team, too, was stacked with a bunch of talent that had already won it and was like half in the NFL, and they just never like reached their potential.
Yeah, there's a lot of 99 Tennessee vibes coming off that team. Yeah,
it's like they were a year early, and then all those players went to the NFL 2 years later. I don't know that they were locked in a way that they needed to be.
Yeah.
And I mean, because winning a championship is hard, but when you go back in time and you like look at some of the best teams in Ohio State history, those teams are the ones that did not win it.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious. I haven't really even thought about this much, but like, this is a 2-loss team that wasn't excellent and didn't beat Michigan for the entire year. But I don't know like where you would put this team in the books of like great Ohio State teams. Like, do you consider this one of the greatest teams?
Would this team have beaten the 2014 team? Like, they've played, I think it'd be a really good game. I don't know who would win.
I don't know that I would be comfortable saying definitively yes.
No, I think both teams would be really good. And the 2002 team loaded, like stars all over the field. So it's really hard to say. And also, that's really kind of a comparison between eras. 2014 and this year's team, I think, are of the same era. 2002 is a different era. Beyond this is a different era. Like the Notre Dame team they beat tonight would probably be more competitive next year. And Notre Dame might be a very high seeded team next year. We'll see. Like we don't even know if they're going to change the seeding. Like if they change the seeding so that conference champs don't automatically get the top 4 seeds, you could have Notre Dame be a top 4 seed depending on how they do next year.
Yeah, the Notre Dame story, because we didn't write about Notre Dame tonight, but there's still meat on that bone.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's tonight or if that's our show on Tuesday or Wednesday, but if I'm a Notre Dame fan, I'm disappointed, but I'm
pumped about the future.
Yeah. And like the thing too, it's like I just like looked up over here because there's a big screen and they showed like national championship odds to win the next year. And Texas is like plus 350 and Ohio State was number 2 at plus 450. And it's like, if Ohio State's number 2 at 450 with the amount of talent they're losing, that gives you a key into the idea of like, hey, that Notre Dame team that, you know, like I think they found out about like Gatehouse tonight. Like,
Jade Greathouse.
Sorry.
He had the big play against Penn State, but then you saw it against this defense, which I'm telling you, there's not going to be a defense that has this level of talent in college football next year.
One of the best offensive lines in the country. Like they have, like if Ohio State is the second most, and maybe those are just like based on whatever. It's very early and rosters aren't set yet, but it's like Notre Dame, if they get back to the playoff next year, isn't going to have to beat an Ohio State. And I know people get upset about this, but it's true.
I mean, they might have to beat Ohio State, but
they're not to be like this team. And like, I'm very curious to see how the NFL draft numbers bear out. But like Ohio State already has all these players that would be in the NFL on their team going into the NFL draft. So but they don't have Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs leaving either. So I don't know.
Those are the 2 best players at their position in college football. Dane Brugler, my friend from The Athletic, who does the draft analysis, does the draft analysis, has said it's possible that this Ohio State team might produce 16 draft picks.
Yeah, I mean
16.
Yeah. No, I mean that's. I mean, when you think about all, and the funny thing is that their 2 best players are not amongst them.
Right.
So if you want to get any, I'm very curious, and we're going to the Senior Bowl next week. Like what happens with Howard?
Yeah.
In terms
What's he
of
look like?
Is he going to shoot up the boards here and not just because of what they did but
and you've talked to Will Howard a little bit too. Like he's one of those guys who, if you talk to him, you're going to like him. I get the sense that. Like the way the Senior Bowl works is they'll have NFL coaches coaching them. Those coaches are going to enjoy coaching Will Howard. The scouts who get a chance to talk to him are going to enjoy talking to him. I think that usually gives a guy a little bump, but then he's got to perform. When the GMs start watching the film, that's really going to tell. But I mean,
he's made some pretty throws. He's a big kid. He runs well. I mean, I don't know.
His performance in these playoffs was pretty spectacular. I did the numbers. They're in my story at On3 right now. 75.6% of his passes completed in the playoffs. 1,150 yards. He averaged 10.6 yards per attempt, which I believe would have been number 1 in the country for the season. So he was awesome. He had 8 touchdowns, I think 1 interception in 4 games. And so he really showed kind of a different side, because I don't think we saw some of the tight window throws at Kansas State. I don't think we saw a lot of them earlier this year. Like there's a throw he makes to Ibuka in the Oregon game that is needle thread between 2 defenders that it's like, wow, how did he do that? And he had another one of those to Jeremiah Smith in the Tennessee game. He had some throws tonight. The throw tonight to Jeremiah Smith on third down to ice the game. Jeremiah Smith's open, but that's a 7-man pressure. Yeah. Like it's a 0 blitz. Everybody's in his face, and he threw it perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, like, it is funny, too, to think that, like, all of the Ohio State quarterbacks that have come through there, that long list of quarterbacks that are legends and in their own regards, it's like he was a 1-year guy.
Yeah.
And he came, I mean, you think he committed around a year around this time, and played himself into a place where he's going to be remembered forever. Very interested to see how people remember him.
The 1-year guy thing is interesting because I think Will Howard and Quinshon Judkins will be, I don't know, Ohio State legend is probably the wrong word, but they will never have to buy a beer in Columbus as long as they live. Like Quinshon Judkins was awesome tonight and was awesome for most of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of bleeds into another separate conversation, which is Ohio State was very efficient with their use of their portal money in terms of the acquisitions they had. Now, there is I saw a lot of this on Twitter.
Need much.
Yeah, they didn't need much, but when it's like souping up a car that's brand new. It's like you already have everything you need, but who doesn't like nicer rims?
What did I say yesterday when we passed the King Ranch? I said if I'd get one of those, but I'd lift it. I'd put big old tires on it. It's a beautiful truck. It's got great leather, but it's a grandpa truck.
Ohio State was the King Ranch, and I guess Quinshon Judkins and Caleb Downs and Will Howard helped lift
our big giant tires.
The roster makeup, because there's a lot made up of like that $20 million, and like you heard, I'm sure you're listening. Like Ryan Day said that that's just their market worth, their value.
Yeah, well, Ross Bjork said something. And Pete Nakos had this in his story. Like he said, you can have all the money in the world. And Bjork pointed out that there were programs that probably spent more than Ohio State.
Sure.
But you have to have the other stuff too. You don't win championships without the other things, without players that care about one another, about, players who respect their coaches, about coaches that, do a good, like Jim Knowles has done exactly what he was hired to do at Ohio State. Remember how bad Ohio State's defense was, how many big plays they gave up before they hired Jim Knowles. And it took a little while, but he fixed it. Chip Kelly was brought in to let Ryan Day be the CEO, to be the play caller and be someone who could be a sounding board, who'd been through all this stuff. Think about this. The guy calling plays for Ohio State tonight had been the head coach of a college football team in a national title game.
And an NFL team.
In a playoff game, yeah. I
mean, it is pretty remarkable the way that everything came together for them. And it just goes to show you too. It's just like when you judge like Notre Dame and Texas and all these other teams, and then it's just like they lost to a team that had an offensive coordinator in Chip Kelly, a defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles, all these players. It's like they're not supposed to win.
No,
this is like. And I know people just can't get over like what happened during the regular season, and rightfully so. If you're a Michigan fan, talk your shit. You deserve to. But the way that this program assembled this year's team was pretty infallible.
Yeah.
And they're lucky that they're in a system now where they're able to get that extra chance, but that's the blueprint. I don't know if anybody's gonna be able to follow that.
The blueprint is also we got a picture of number 4 up there. Jeremiah Smith is just a freak of nature, and also proof that you still need to go get good freshmen. Like you still need to get good players out of high school. That still matters a lot. And Jeremiah Smith was just awesome. He caught a touchdown pass that was an homage. And I'll point Michael Casagrande from AL.com pointed this out first online, but then Jeremiah Smith confirmed it after the game. So the first touchdown that Ohio State scored is a play that Alabama ran against Ohio State in the national title game after the 2020 season. Here is Jeremiah Smith talking about that play.
First touchdown, or just the only touchdown you had tonight on the motion there?
Alabama ran it like 2-3 years ago with Devontae Smith. So something that we just put in this week. Wasn't never a player of ours, but it worked today, I should say.
When you saw him pointing at you, did you think, oh no, He said,
yeah.
When you saw him pointing at you, did you think, oh no, they figured it out?
Oh no. They we run a lot of like Stoney's RPOs and stuff like that. So he thought I was going the other way, but I wasn't. Which he looked stupid on that play, but it worked for sure.
I love the goggles. When he came out in those goggles, I was like, "This is listen."
Were they spraying champagne in there or something?
Maybe.
I don't know.
They were smoking cigars.
Yeah.
We'll show a clip of Donovan.
State thing. That's a SEC thing.
Well, that's a Joe Burrow thing.
Yeah.
Well, Alabama and Tennessee do it, but Joe Burrow, the famous picture of him with the cigar after they beat Clemson. But
maybe one of the coolest pictures ever taken of a
yes,
human being
my picture of Donovan Jackson with his cigar, not nearly as cool, but Donovan Jackson looked awesome with that cigar. And but Jeremiah Smith, you can't say enough about him. And when Notre Dame went with that zero blitz on that key third down at the end, because remember, that's an 8-point game. Notre Dame, if they could make the stop there, they're going to get a chance to score and potentially tie the game. They send 7, which leaves Jeremiah Smith one-on-one. And you know what happens when Jeremiah Smith's one-on-one.
Yep.
He got open, and Will Howard delivered it perfectly. And it was such a fitting way to end it because all the complaints, And again, because Will Howard had run, they called some quarterback runs for Will Howard. They've been very conservative. They got themselves in that third down situation by being really conservative. And you heard everybody, why are you doing this? Why don't you dance?
Well, those thoughts start to creep back.
Yeah,
in their head
dance
too.
with the one who brung you. Like, just throw it to the guy that nobody can cover. And they did.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the game.
Yeah. And it's funny because that felt like a blowout the entire game. And then Notre Dame, more credit to them for fighting back and, putting in a position. But if that pass is overthrown or Jeremiah drops or whatever, they're kicking the ball back and they've got a few minutes down 8 to try to go get a tie game and force overtime. So, to call that play in that moment, I thought too kind of showed some growth and some confidence in your players. That's the number one most frustrating thing in the world to me. And that's not just an Ohio State thing. It's everybody. It's like when you have really great players and then you do things to take the ball out of their hands, like you're supposed to let your horses run. You know what I mean? Like, that's why I love going for it on fourth down so much. That's why I love Dan Lanning, because, he might not win, but he's going to go down swinging by putting the ball in his best player's hands and applauding Ohio State.
About being named Dan, I think. Dan Lanning, Dan Quinn, Dan Campbell.
Yeah.
But, look, Marcus Freeman did it a couple times. He went, he faked a punt and then went for it later on fourth down. So they went for several fourth downs in that opening drive that I thought they were going to get Riley Leonard killed, but man, it was a hell of a way to start it off. And you thought maybe Notre Dame's got a shot in this game.
Yeah, well, there was a moment too. It's like Notre Dame ran all the way down the field on Ohio State in their opening possession. And Riley Leonard carried the ball 9 times, and it was just like J.T. Barrett all over again.
But you're like, this is not sustainable.
And then just like he had 9 carries on that drive, and I'm like, I don't think he's going to have 51 carries in this game. Are they going to be able to figure something out? But then when Ohio State came out on their next possession and ran on their first 2 possessions or their first 2 plays,
you're like,
I was like, no, it's happening.
And,
because you did make the point in the press box during the game. You're like, if you wanted to call somebody soft, that's a pretty efficient way of doing it without having to say it. And Notre Dame had it was like an 8-minute drive. Too.
10 minutes. It was 10 minutes. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that was like the perfect start. And then Ohio State goes down the field in 7 plays.
On third down, they convert with a throw
to Jeremiah.
Yeah. To Jeremiah Smith. And you're just like, okay, never mind. They're fine.
Yeah.
Will Howard made a lot of people happy because he had the quote unquote free PrizePicks square. It's never free. He's got to throw for a yard, but he threw for a yard. Just because the college football season's over does not mean America's best daily fantasy game stops. They got it all. College basketball, the NFL, the NBA. Download that app. Use the code STAPLES when you sign up. Play $5, get $50 instantly. If you're going to be watching the NFL playoffs this weekend, and I'm sure you are, Jaden Daniels becomes your favorite player because he's got the 0.5 passing yards more square. You hit that one, you're probably going to win that one. Probably. No, nothing's ever guaranteed, but you're probably going to win that one. And then maybe you combine it with Patrick Mahomes. His number against Buffalo, 253.5 passing yards. You decide if it's more or less. You pick as few as 2 squares, as many as you want. The higher the number of squares, the higher the potential payout. So give it a shot. Jaden Daniels, if he throws for a yard, you're in good shape with PrizePicks. Download the app. Use code STAPLES. Play $5. Get $50 instantly. All right, Ari. What was your favorite moment from the first 12-team playoff? He's zoning out.
I'm trying to remember, but I think the Arizona State-Texas game.
I think that was the best game. I definitely think that was the best game. And just the draw. Okay, you think it's over. Arizona State storms back. Arizona State was then very much in control. Texas, 4th and 13?
Yeah.
They convert with a touchdown. I mean,
yeah,
it was pretty incredible. I thought Notre Dame Penn State was an incredible game.
Yeah, that was also an incredible game. I mean, in terms of like riveting, edge of your seat, compelling television, I think it was Texas Arizona State.
And just look at the brand, look at the brands, look at the logos. You had Ohio State Tennessee, Ohio State Oregon, Ohio State Texas, and Ohio State Notre Dame. That's awesome. But you had Notre Dame Penn State, you had Notre Dame Georgia in this thing. Like, we got a lot of games that the old system wouldn't have given us.
Yeah.
Like, all of these just would have spread out. There'd been one game and it'd be over.
Yeah. No, I think that the system, and that's the thing too, of like everybody wants to kind of mess with the seeding and stuff. And I think I probably am in the change the seeding camp to 1
I
through
just
12.
think it's common sense.
But at the same time too, like this worked perfectly.
I don't know that it changed much else.
Did this work perfectly? I mean,
yeah, I wouldn't want to make everybody travel the second, and I don't think they should travel the second and third weekends, but I'd be okay with the semis being at bowls.
I mean, it is kind of weird that Ohio State played in the Rose and Cotton in the same year.
Yeah, and then had to go to Atlanta too.
Right. It was like 3 bowl games in 1 year. But in terms of just the way it was set up and the teams playing each other, like I do feel pretty comfortable saying it was settled on the field, right? Like,
oh, 100%. I don't question the legitimacy of Ohio State's championship. And this, the more I think about it, makes me, I don't question the legitimacy of past champions. I just question the format that produced it. Like,
well, it makes you think how many other Ohio States from this year were out lingering as two lost
right.
teams
What would have happened in tournaments like this in the past? Because I think there's some teams that if they'd gotten in them, like 2007, Georgia's a really good example.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were so good at the end of the season, but they inexplicably lost to Tennessee early, didn't win the SEC East, and they never got a chance to play that LSU team that won the national title.
Yeah,
which would have been like they're in the same league, but they never played.
There's probably 50 national championships that would have gone the different way if you invited teams 5 through 10 in.
Yeah,
like I mean, like that's just
and I think now the way the sport has changed, because look, it's still not fair to Toledo. It's probably still not fair to West Virginia, but it's more fair.
Why is it not fair to West Virginia?
Because it's harder. If you're West Virginia, keep your good players. When you got a good player, they tend to go somewhere.
I thought you meant the system, though.
Yeah, no, not the conference they're in. They're fine with their conference, but the teams at the bottom of their conference are still going to be the ones that get fed on by the ones that are at the top of their conferences or in the Big Ten and the SEC. But I do think teams 5 through 20 feel like they got a lot better shot nowadays.
Oh, for sure. And I think it's because teams 1 through 4 aren't as unattainable.
Yeah.
Maybe this year they were, but I mean, I think that Georgia, a team that was completely untouchable for the last 5 years, could have theoretically lost to Miami if they played. Like, I don't think that's an insane thing to think.
No, it's not.
So, like, and Miami's defense stinks. I get it. But, like, I just mean as an example.
Yeah, no.
Like, teams that won 10 games.
There's a universe where that definitely could happen. Yeah.
So, that's real. And it's just like, I guess it comes down to preference. It's like, are there people out there that resent the fact that this Ohio State team got to do this year? Or are there people that are happy that they got a second and third chance?
If you resent that, it's probably because you hate Ohio State, which look, maybe you're a Michigan fan or maybe you just don't like Ohio State.
What if Notre Dame would have won and, they got to overcome their NIU? There's a lot of teams in here that got to overcome things.
Yeah, in the national title game, you had 2 teams that had committed unforgivable offenses in the old system.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have been there.
And then, like, also Texas, too. It's like Texas lost to Georgia twice. The only team that came into this thing perfect was Oregon.
Yeah.
And they're the one that
they got
play
destroyed.
Ohio State. So, and they got their ass kicked. So, like, it's like I have so many feelings about the 12-team playoff because I was so, like, vehemently against it.
Yeah.
And, like, all the things that I hated about it are actually things that came true. I think Ohio State, for instance, like, my platform was that Ohio State should not get to compete for a championship.
But is it that when it happened, you realized you didn't hate it as much as you thought you would?
It's not that Ohio State got the second chance that made me change my mind. What changed my mind was Arizona State.
Like being in the game,
like I think
surprising us.
I think that college football, as you like to lovingly put it, is an entertainment product. And I think that we are all better for knowing both Scadaboo's story. And I don't think that we would have known it in the old system. And because he wouldn't have played on that stage, that game wouldn't have mattered.
Cam Scadaboo lost.
Yeah.
But in that, not even in the 3.5 hours of the game, in the final hour of the game, Cam Scadaboo became the most famous person in America that day.
Or if the Big 12 championship game was just a game to crown the Big 12 champion, the entire world wouldn't have watched it captivated by who gets the automatic bid and then wouldn't have seen his awesome performance. And that was where the legend began. So like I do think that, like, if the alternative is giving Ohio State and Georgia 2 mulligans to get in.
Yeah.
If that means that we get to watch, like if Kevin Jennings would have gone off against Penn State, like all these players that we wouldn't have talked about in December in the past get a chance to tell their story. And you know what? Like, the thing that I've never really understood is like everybody's just disdain for blowouts. Like they're so like I know, of course, playing in a game that comes down to 2nd and 26 or whatever. What was the down?
2nd and 26. You got
2nd and 26 is like more exciting, but like I also feel like blowouts are a key part of the system in order to determine which teams are playing well or whatever. Like because SMU got blown out doesn't make me feel like SMU shouldn't have been in. It's just the playoff doing its job the same way it happens in the NFL playoffs.
The NFL's first round had several blowouts, and then their second weekend was a lot of really good games.
Right, and I think that the games got better in this system as the time went on.
Yeah,
the Ohio State-Texas game was good. This game was pretty good.
This game turned out pretty great, actually, when you think about it, because you had Notre Dame with a 3rd down. If they get the stop, they will have the ball with a reasonable amount of time to try to score and tie the game.
Yeah,
that's about all you can expect. That's all you can hope for.
Yeah. So, I think that this is the system working. I don't know if I felt like you were right about this thing. So the Ohio State-Michigan game was a massive deal. A big enough deal for us to pull over to the side of the road and do a video.
We must do a video on the side of the road and let people honk at Ari.
State College. But at the same time, too, the gravity of that loss was not gone. Like when it happened, it felt like the world was ending.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Well, and we'll see. Maybe that will change over the years. But I suspect in those moments, we'll still be prisoners of the moment, and we'll still be, because the thing is, at least I think, when that game happened, imagining something like this was very difficult. Right. Imagining Ohio State going on this run was difficult because of what our eyes had just seen. Now maybe we look at it differently, but I don't know that we will. I think we'll probably react the same way.
I don't know
the next one
in 10 years of data.
Maybe
once we become accustomed to it not mattering, it won't feel as big.
Yeah.
But I felt like the regular when Alabama lost to Vandy, when Notre Dame lost to NIU, like those, we still talked about them a lot.
Big, yeah.
It felt big, and it might not ultimately matter in the end. But like I thought this was a really fun season. So like I don't know.
I'm gonna put you on the spot. What was your favorite moment of the season?
Oh God.
You can do a top 3 or top 5 if you don't have to rank them. Just throw them out there.
The Vanderbilt Alabama game was really cool.
That was awesome.
Because Pavia, the way that it wasn't because Alabama lost. It was the way that Vanderbilt won the game.
Yes,
it was so foreign to
see.
Ballsy,
just going for it. Yeah, I loved that.
This is going to sound bizarre, but I think the Ohio State Michigan game was one of my favorite moments.
Oh, it was an incredible
because that
situation
to me was the most drama filled storyline of the year, and I am a sucker for trashy TV. So like, if you like
well, some of these games that knock teams out, I was at the Florida Ole Miss game and just in shock.
Yeah,
because we had just seen Ole Miss beat Georgia in another really interesting game, because we hadn't seen Georgia beaten like that in the Kirby Smart era, and that's Ole Miss's next game, and I walked into it like, well, I'll cover this because it'll be Ole Miss kind of solidifying this thing, because then they'll just have to win the Egg Bowl and they'll be in the playoff.
I got another one.
Yeah.
The Georgia Tech Georgia game.
Yes, the 8 overtime game. That was incredible.
That was pretty cool. You were over at my house. That was a pretty cool night. It's 4 a.m, so I don't know if I'm forgetting anything.
Oh, there's some great games.
We'll have to have a show in the next few weeks.
Colorado had some crazy ones. Like the Colorado Baylor game was awesome.
The Colorado Hail Mary to win.
That was the Baylor game.
Yeah. That was. We should do like a top 10 moments.
No, that was to tie, and then Travis Hunter forced the fumble to win.
Oh, the forced fumble for Hunter. Yeah. I thought that this season was great.
Yeah.
I think that we had an atypical Heisman winner.
Yep.
We had a story line of a coach in Dion, that kept giving.
Well, and another one of my favorite stories was Kenny Dillingham.
Kenny Dillingham emerging.
We didn't expect anything out of Kenny Dillingham when he took that job. Think about where Arizona State was when Herm Edwards got fired. We thought this is just going to be a dumpster fire that Kenny Dillingham, they're hiring the young guy. He's from Phoenix. They're going to have to give him like 5 years to get this figured out. He won the league in 2 years.
Yeah. And maybe, more emerging stars. Like there's so much in this offseason. Like 5 biggest risers in coaching.
Oh, also
Like,
Dion might still get the Cowboys job.
Yeah, I'm sure. That'll
Like,
probably happen tomorrow.
when we talked about that on the show, I was like, this is just a Stephen A. Smith fever dream. This isn't really going to happen. But I don't know. And we're still potentially a few weeks away from anything happening.
Yeah. It's I've got a feeling like the off season is going to be easy, at least the next month. I know the grind is hard, but man, that was a lot of fun, and it was so great to be back with you, Andy.
Yes.
I had a blast, and now we're going to get to flourish on our own, as we go off.
Oh,
into the no games.
there will be more grab ass in the
grab
off
ass in the off season,
but we're going to have a lot of fun. Like Ari said, we're going to be at the Senior Bowl. We're actually going to be in New Orleans for one day before the Super Bowl.
It's going to be electric.
Talking to some NFL players about their college experiences. This is going to be really fun. We got college coaches who'll be coming on. We're going to be talking to college players.
Got a pretty good doozy for Thursday.
We got a doozy for Thursday. Oh, it's gonna be fun. One of our favorite interviews that we've done so far. So, and also, you guys in the chat, you know how to find us via email. Send us some suggestions. Who do you want us to talk to? Who would you love us? When I say us, who would you love for Ari to crawl around inside the head of?
It's a weird way to put
like
it.
like a parasite.
Yeah, great.
It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, and I don't know, we're gonna kick around some ideas too, but we want to make sure that you guys are involved and recognized. But I don't know, at the sake of being corny, I just want to thank you for being here. And without you guys and without your support and the community that we're building here, this show doesn't exist. So,
and tell your friends that if they're bored in the off season and those other shows they cut down their show days and they're not doing. We're still here every day.
We're going to be doing some secret to life stuff. We're going to be doing
rules for life. That's right.
Life.
That's right.
We're going to be doing some hopefully food rankings. We've got some stuff up our sleeves that we haven't really because I started right when the season started, so we never really had time to ease into this. Now we've got a long off season of really starting to flourish into what the show is going to be and where it's going to be in the future. So
it is going to be so much fun. So tell all your friends, hey, if all those other shows aren't giving you enough shows, Andy and Ari are here Monday through Friday, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. We're going to be, when news breaks, we might have emergency shows.
Yeah.
This is, college football doesn't stop just because the season's over. We'll be right here for you, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.